welcome to the Scoop, part of the VET S.O.S podcast network. My name is Kingsley Scott. I am the co-host, and the one that's bringing in is going to be talking about information is Bill Kieffer. So Bill is an outstanding veteran. He's an outstanding entrepreneur, and I'm going to share some insights about Bill, and then you're going to run and go get it. Because if I would have had this during my transition, man, I don't know where I would be. I know I would be in a better place than I am now. But now that we're here, now it's time to get the scoop. So Bill Kieffer is a coach, advisor, author, and two-time entrepreneur focused on helping service members and veterans succeed before, during, and after career transition. His distinctive insights from the employee side of the desk perspective provides no nonsense, practical value to veterans and employees alike, closing the culture gap that stands between veterans and civilian employers. Bill served nearly 12 years as a U.S. Army officer, survived a tough career transition, then created a successful 20-plus year career as an HR and talent management executive in a large complex for-profit companies. He began his entrepreneur journey in 2018, founding Kieffer and Associates Limited, an advisory firm specializing in veteran career transition, leadership coaching, strategic talent management, and professional speaking and facilitating services. In 2023, he co-founded Veteran Career Journey, a 501c3 dedicated to closing the veteran employer culture gap and reducing veteran suicide by sharing insights to the civilian network. Norms and expectations so veterans are better prepared for success before, during, and after career transition. Bill is the author of two books. And I have them here, y'all. I got the two books. It came straight to my desk because I had to read them. Military Career Transition. That's the one that we're going to be talking about today. Insights from the employer side of the desk, which was released in July 2021 as the #1 release in Amazon Job Hunter category. This book prepares readers for success before, during, and after career transition. The second, Veteran Career Journey. That's okay. I got the job. Now what? Now what do I do? Guess what? Bill got you covered. More insight from the employer side of the desk, which was released in May 2023 and is co-authored by Dave White, a retired U.S. Army Ranger. This book focuses on preparing readers for success after landing a civilian gig. Wait, there's more. He also serves as a longtime coach, faculty member for the Army, a nonprofit providing career transition services to the special ops community. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Bill, how you doing? Greetings, brother. Welcome to the scoop.
What's up, Kings? It's great to be here on the scoop with you, man. The inaugural session, I hear.
Yes, you are the first guest on the scoop.
Awesome.
So this is gonna be culture shocking. This is gonna be one for the ages. And guess what? First means that it never happen again. So you already got that stamp. So now that's another one you can add to the resume.
There you go, man. There you go. It's great to be here with you, Kings.
Yeah, sure, Bill. So if you don't mind, if you don't, to tell the listeners here on the scoop, um, let us know a little bit more about yourself. Like, and we're gonna talk about your book. Like I said, I read through. If I would have had this in my transition in 2018, I know I would be so much further than I am now. But I'm glad I came across it now because it's all about and in the scoop is to pay it forward to people that's coming behind me. So please, let's just share your journey.
I appreciate that. I was my whole career goal was to be a career Army officer. I figured I'd do 25, 30 years and then at some point figure it out. Well, about 11 years in, my career journey was changed by my life journey. I went through a divorce, kind of unexpectedly. I had three small kids at the time, and despite being on the promotion list to major, I resigned my commission and walked away. Okay, now there's a lot of details behind all that, but I was a mess when I got out. I was an absolute mess. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to do it. I stumbled and I tripped and I fell and made some bad mistakes that, fortunately I was able to recover from to get my feet up underneath me and then spend the next couple of decades in corporate America as a senior leader doing HR and talent management work. Um, Throughout my whole time in corporate America, I was helping veterans informally. somebody would come up and say, hey, my nephew just got out, my uncle this, my brother that, I got a friend who, would you talk to him? And I did. So in 2018, and Kings, Sean knows this, but Kings, I'm a really transparent guy. I just tell people my story. In
Right.
2018, a couple of decades of corporate grind got a hold of me, and I had a massive heart attack. Okay. My life journey changed my career journey again. So I was like, God, what do I do? Do I keep going after this career global job? It was great money, but man, it's literally killing me. And my wife asked me a really good question. She goes, do you want to make impact or do you want to make income? I thought, holy smokes, that's a real question. You know what? I want to go do the best I can to help people. To your word, pay it forward, to help those folks that are wearing the uniform today or have worn the uniform in the past get to be as successful as they can be in their careers. So that's kind of the journey. The books were honestly kind of an accident. I didn't intend to write a book. I started in 2018 with my Kieffer and Associates, the for-profit business. COVID hit in 20. It's like, I got a lot of notes laying here and not a lot of business going on. What do I do? And as I started to organize my notes, a book kind of emerged. So, yeah, that one right there. And what that book does is shares practical, no nonsense insights of what really goes on in the civilian work world. 93% of the population never served in uniform, but our military veterans haven't served in the civilian world for many years or maybe many decades. And there's a gap there. So we got to figure out, do whatever we can to help close that gap. So that was the mission. So that's kind of the nickel tour.
Wow. I appreciate that insight, Bill, because like we talked before I hit the record button. I was like, wow, I could just imagine 'cause when I came into service, I was young. I was in my 20. I was 20. A
Mm-hmm.
kid 20 from Brooklyn, New York, coming into the military, and then I stayed. I wasn't planning on staying, but it just happened to
Mm-hmm.
be a little over 20 years. So I got used to that culture. I got used to that environment. And then when I had to transition back to the civilian sector, I was like a fish out of water. And when
Absolutely.
I
And
was
if
going
you
through your
think,
book, yeah,
go
I'm sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was saying, and when I was going through your book, I seen the first thing which caught my eye was number 8 says most employers know nothing about the military. Many don't care, and you just hit that point. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, military and everything around us is military. Everything around us, even if they're civilians, is there to support our military mission. Everybody around us is there with some level of familiarity. And then you leave, you take the uniform off, and unless you go work for a contractor or on a military installation, you're surrounded by people who haven't done what you've done. They haven't walked your walk, they haven't been in your world, but you haven't been in their world either. And the norms and expectations that you have as a military service member are just totally foreign and unknown to the vast majority of the people around you. They're not bad people. They just haven't been where you've been. But you got to remember, you haven't been where they've been either. And you're trying to break into their world. So you can't really expect people to go, oh, certainly you love it when people appreciate your service. Thanks for your service. I appreciate it. And that's good. That does not get you the job. Okay. The other side of that is there are people in the civilian world that absolutely do not like the military. And no matter what you do, you're not going to change it. So you got to figure out how and where to pick your battles, if you will, and how to fit in to the world you seek to enter.
Wow, that's huge, Bill. 'Cause when I did my transition, I took a little career transition break before I entered the
Okay.
workforce, and when I was going for interviews, I went to a couple, and I guess they just see military, right? So they like you
Mm-hmm.
said, they kind of had their hand, at a hand distance and stuff. So I was like, well,
Yep.
how can I show me Kings, right? I'm not the CNCO anymore. I'm Kings. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm a son of two um young adults that got together. You see what I'm saying? Like I want y'all to
Mhm.
know me. How can I be a good fit for the team? And when I took out but starting out like, oh, I did, you know, military. I kind of started off as me as my personality, and then later on during the interview, they asked, oh, so what did you do before? Like, oh, well, I served in the military, and then that kind of like eased it a little bit because they knew me first. So when you wrote that portion in the book, like, can you can you share of now we're talking about the young people and individuals that are transitioning now in 2025 that's going to come across this podcast since this is the first one. How does that align with what's going on in today's transition framework?
So, yeah, you bring up a really good point. We've had probably what the longest war in history in the last couple of decades, right? But there's nothing active going on, right? But the focus on military activity is different now than it was for the last couple of decades, right? It's not necessarily center mind for everybody. So while people generally are more supportive of the military, it's still very different and it's not necessarily center mind. So what you do as a transitioning service member is have to go, how do I present myself in a way that's going to land well on the listener's ears? I screwed this up when I got out, and I think a lot of folks still do it today. And I've probably worked with over 2,000 veterans, right? Um, and we all screw it up. People ask me when I got out, and it happens still today with folks, what'd you do in the military? And I proudly said, I was a 90 Alpha, 5 Papa, 3 Romeo. And they laugh or they're confused. So I thought, you know what? You probably don't understand. Let me help. I said I was a tactical multifunctional logistics officer. I was airborne, nuclear, biological, and chemical certified. And for those that weren't scared to death, they were still very confused. And what I like to share with folks that are transitioning is when you get that question, you got to remember that what they're saying is only half of what they want to know. What did you do in the military is what they say. But what they want to know is, what did you do in the military that's relevant to what I need? That's what they want to know. So you have to figure out how to make yourself relevant to the employer's needs. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. So you got to understand how you can best answer the two questions that they're always going to ask. I've sat in thousands of interviews, and the recap afterwards, the little caucus afterwards, always boils down to some version of who's the candidate that best fits our team and can most likely do the work we need done. Okay. If you can go
Wow.
into, yeah, if you can go into a networking discussion and interview focused on the employer and telling your story in a way that they can understand, you become a more interesting candidate when it comes to answering those two questions.
Wow. So y'all hearing it first on the scoop. So why do y'all think it's called the scoop, right? Because y'all get inside. Like y'all are getting the inside, as I say, write this down. Because it just goes into the next point that you put on inside your book. Number 14 says, we don't speak mill speak or veteranese. I tell people, hey, I'm from New York. I speak Brooklynese, and then they like, what is that? I was like, sometimes you don't understand me, right? Just like what you said earlier. Oh, I'm a 92 Bravo. For me, I'm a 3 Papa. Okay, and they like, well, okay, what is that? And then you have to break it down and explain to them. So can you tap in on that, like the speaking military talk or veteran talk to non-military, non-veteran people? How do you bridge that gap? How do you make it more fluid or a more engaging conversation?
Yeah, and I like to remind people that when they entered the military, they didn't speak mill speak and veteranese then. They had to learn it, right? Most of us don't know the phonetic alphabet when we join the military. Some do, and most of us can't read a 24-hour clock, but some can. Most people, when they join the military, they have no idea what all these various acronyms are, right? But you'll learn it over time. How did you learn it? By immersing yourself in the organization, in the culture, in the team. You listened. You heard what people were saying. That approach, even though it's not as organized and not as programmatic, is exactly the same approach that helped prepare you for success when you're leaving. I like to say your transition out of the military is very different than your transition in. similar to what I just relayed about language. When you join the military, everything around you is there for your success. Now, it may not feel like it. Push-ups somehow don't seem to feel like a success measure, but on the way out, you're kind of on your own. And you're on your own in a world that's full of unknown people and processes and tools and techniques. And you're like, oh God, what do I do? Okay. So, in terms of learning the language, well, in many ways, if you can figure out what you learned and how you learned it in the military and leverage that process as you exit, great. On the language side, you learned it because you were immersed in it. So, immerse yourself in the civilian language.
Man,
Podcast,
wow.
read things, talk to people that are in the space that
Right.
you want to be in. If you don't know what they're talking about, ask them. Do it when you're networking. Don't wait till an interview when it really matters. Okay. I even tell people if you find a job that you're maybe not so specifically interested in, but they'll talk to you, do a practice interview. If you bomb, it doesn't matter. Go to job fairs.
Right. So
Okay.
you know what's going on.
Go to job.
Yes.
Yeah. And interview with folks you don't want to work for. Talk to them. Learn what they're, get your reps in when it can't hurt you. Okay. But just like you immerse yourself in the language and stuff on the way in, start to immerse yourself in the language of the world you want to be in.
Wow. That's that that's very powerful, Bill, because I remember my transition. Even doing this podcast right now, when I was younger in grade school, I used to have a real speech impediment. I used to stutter a lot. They used to call me stutter, like stuttering Stanley, stuttering. Yeah, that was me. So I used to stutter a lot. So I like for me to be a public speaker or for me to even be on a podcast is huge. But like you said, I had to sit and learn and engulf myself and be to that
Yep.
culture and to that area so I know what it's like. And then somebody just
Yep.
told me, and it's out there, it's on people's shirts and stuff. It's like nobody can work harder, right? That was my mentality in my transition, right?
Yep.
Because you hit the nail on the head when you said once you transition, you're on your own for this part, right? Because you're going back into shark infested waters, right? Like you and you have to make sure that your spear is sharp, that you have gas in on boat, so just you don't want to get stuck out in the middle of the water because it's shark infested waters. And the other part that you put in your book, and like I said, every single hey, y'all need to pick this up, right? Because I read this thing and I like, man, check, yeah, I've been through that. I know somebody who went through that, and the one I really wanted that really I circled two times around was the me not we. The sense of team is quite different. Because I remember being in the military environment, right? It didn't matter your color, it didn't matter how tall, how short. Here's the mission. We need to get it done. It wasn't like this team would know, but on the civilian side, I think a little bit different. Like it just that different. I was like, hey, why don't we just work together? And some people like to, hoard information or keep a project close hold because they feel that that's their key to stay on the team. And the military is like, it doesn't matter. Like, hey, if with or going thing, if somebody, unfortunately succumb to injuries, you have to pick up that weapon and keep going forward, right? So for you to put that in there, can you touch on that me and we mentality from the
Sure.
military to the civilian?
Sure. So every branch of service out there starts at basic training, boot camp, whatever they call it. It starts with a focus on the team, right? The team survives together. The team wins together. You got to perform your part as part of the team. And that's critically important, as you said, in the military. And it's not that teamwork, team building, being a good team member isn't important in the civilian world. But as you're transitioning out, you're not in the civilian world yet. Okay. I like to say the difference here is you have to be your own chief marketing officer because employers are looking to fill jobs that because there's a business need, right? And if you can't tell them what you did that's relevant to their need, they're not going to listen as well because they can't afford to hire your whole team, right? So, hey, I was part of a team and this were my duties on the team and things were successful because the team did great. And they're like, the next follow-up question as an interview is, what was your contribution to the team? And if you can't articulate that, it almost sounds like you're taking credit for somebody else's work. And that ain't good. Okay. So you got to remember that you have to understand team. You got to be able to be a good team member. And when you're on the job, like you said, there are a lot of people out in the civilian world that don't necessarily operate like we did as teams. Okay. And that's okay. It's just hard. You got to navigate that. But you got to be able to tell the folks why they should invest in you. Okay. And I will tell you, your civilian counterparts that have been interviewing in the civilian world for, they know how to do this. They know how to tell that story. You know, I was a member of a 6-person team that was responsible for X, Y, Z, and my duties and responsibilities on that team were A, B, and C. And let me tell you about A, B, and
Oh,
C. And
okay.
here's
I see
what I
that.
did to make A, B, and C work that contributed to the team's overall success. And here was
Got
the
you.
result. A, B, and C were check, 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 and therefore the overall team mission succeeded. Okay. So, I
Wow.
mean, think about,
Okay.
like, I'm not a huge sports guy, but think about like baseball, a triple play. If any one of those players misses, the team mission doesn't succeed.
Right.
But they got to be able to say, look, I was playing third base on this one and I caught the ball first and I got it over to second, second to first. Okay. You got to tell the team story, but you have to focus on what you contributed to the success because they're only hiring you. They don't have money to hire the
Got you.
whole team.
Got you. So Bill, so what I'm understanding is when people are going for interviews and definitely during their transition, you recommend they highlight the overall team and then talk about specifically what they did to make that team successful. Like this is what the overall team did, but this is what I did specifically to make sure that team was successful.
Yeah, I mean, if
Okay.
if you tell stories that was just me and it was if it weren't for me, this whole thing would have fallen apart. I mean, you kind of sound like an arrogant lone wolf, right? So recognize that you're part of a team. Recognize that you had a contribution. Focus on your contribution, but remember that it was part of a team's success.
Wow. No, so like I'm just so ecstatic about this conversation right here because it's so genuine and it's fluent. I said, hey Bill, we're just gonna have a conversation. We're just gonna talk it, and wherever it goes, it goes. You know, wherever it flows, it goes. So the next thing I circled that I wanted to touch on was, check this out, number 27 in your book. I have it right here. Number 27 says, to be crystal clear, it is your responsibility to make it easy for employees to notice you. Convince us that you are the best candidate to fill our openings, that you can do the work we need done, and that you're a great fit for our team. Crazy thing is, you just said that without me even prompting it. So y'all know this is validated right here. Write it down.
Write it down. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, the folks you're interviewing with, they're busy people. And
Mm,
many times the folks that you're interviewing with are not professional interviewers. Even if they're the hiring manager, they're managing something other than hiring most of the time, right? They're busy, they're focused on a lot of different stuff, and they don't have a lot of time for a lot of silliness. Okay. So you got to remember that you need to be focused on convincing them that you're the best candidate. To one, do the job they need done, and two, fit well and add value to the team. So, how do you go about being convincing? Well, one, don't be a jerk. Have a little smile on your face, you know, and be engaging and, you know, be nice to everybody in the process because I will ask the security guard if you were a jerk or not. Okay. And then you got to make sure that you're telling a story the way they can hear it. Okay. But understand what they're asking for and answer the asks. Listen to what they're asking and then answer that question. Before you go in, look at the job description, the job posting, the job advertisement, whatever they call it. It's a menu of what they're asking for. All you got, and when I'm coaching people individually, I tell them this. I said, you take whatever that is you have, the job description, job posting, whatever, and on the left side of a piece of paper, write all the stuff down. They want this kind of experience and this education and these capabilities and blah, blah, right? Write them down. And to the right of each one, what's your answer for each one of those? Ask, Answer. And if you can answer their ask. Let me try that again. If you can answer their asks without using too much mill speak and veteranese in a way that's compelling, now all of a sudden you become interesting. And you might be on the way to being that candidate that they select.
And that goes straight into the culture, the climate and culture. So the other part of the highlight, it says the culture gap divides military veterans in the civilian world. It is significant and solvable. So here I am, you know, talk about me, right? I can't talk about nobody else. I highlight myself. So here I am, 20 years later, I'm transitioning out of the service and I'm trying to find a new identity. The culture in the military is, hey, you ask somebody, everybody to help you out. On the outside is not so much. It's like, well, here's some information, or go look it up yourself, or go do this, or you got to figure it out. But this book right here that matter of fact, how long did it take you for to put all these good notes together? Like how many? Like I know you said you had notes all over the place, and you just finally put it together, bought it up in a book, and pushed it out for others to put in their arsenal.
Yeah, start to finish, because I've been making notes my whole professional career, but from start to finish, about a year. About a year. Yeah.
So the culture gap divides military veterans in the civilian work world. It is significant and solvable. What did you mean by that? Or how can you share with us that the ones that are about to do that transition into their next part of the journey, you said it's solvable. What are some tips that you could provide here in the scoop?
Yeah, so the culture gap needs to be solved from both ends, and it starts with a willingness to understand the other party, right? If I, as a veteran transitioning out, having not worked in the civilian work, will go, okay, look, I know this isn't the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, Space Force, whatever, right? But what is it? It's a willingness to understand, one, that it's different, and two, that I got some things to learn to decide whether it even is right for me. Now, the civilian work world culture is a lot different in many ways. In most jobs, it's not life or death. Some are. Most jobs, they're not. They're not. They are primarily motivated by money. Whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, money matters far more than it does in the military, right? Um, the way planning happens, decision making happens, resourcing happens, it's all very different. Okay. The way market demands, customer demands, the way technology shifts, while some of that has an impact in the military, the extent of the impact and the breadth of the impact is far different in the civilian world. And that comes out in the culture, right? I'll give you an example. Most civilian jobs don't require uniforms. Now, some do, law enforcement and some, paramilitary things, and they do, but most jobs don't require a uniform. Now, that sounds like a small change, but it's a cultural difference that can have a real impact. Think of it this way. When you go to a new unit, you're meeting somebody and they're wearing their uniform. You look at the collar, you look at the shirt, their resumes on their chest, right? You know who's in charge, you know who the key advisor. You can probably tell who's the signal guy and who's the engineer and who's you can probably tell just by you can tell where they've been. Depending on which uniform they're wearing, right? By their awards and appurtenances and all this and that, right? Then you go to the civilian world and everybody's wearing business casual, whatever that happens to mean. And you look around going, uh-oh, who's in charge?
Wow.
Who's here to support? Who's the decision maker?
Yes.
Who's offering what? How do I fit in this? Okay. It's a
Wow.
subtle difference, but an underappreciated real difference. The other thing that I found is most service members, from a cultural standpoint, are much, much more capable of and much faster at assessing situations and problem solving. This is a challenge I had. Okay, I came out and I worked in an air freight company. It was fast paced and it was time critical and all that stuff. But man, I could walk into a situation and assess things really quick and make recommendations on how to solve the problem. And I want to pissing people off. They're like, "You've been here 20 minutes." 20 minutes.
Right.
How did you assess all that? Not that I was wrong, but they were like, "I've been here 20 years and I didn't see all that." I said, "I don't know. That's how I was trained." So you just,
Right.
that kind of thing, well, it can be an asset. If you don't modulate that a little bit, you can run over people really quick, and that's not good. So
Wow.
anyway, those are examples of the culture difference.
No, and that's good because the next one I was going to talk about or see if we could just chat on was decisions aren't always rational. And we talked about that a little bit before we started. Like, and the service, like, well, you don't have time. Like, this decision, we'll go with it. But now, when I did the transition, I'm in the civilian sector. I'm like, why did they make that decision? Like, they didn't think about this and this, but in the civilian world, it's like they have to act on information at the time because if they don't get to it, somebody else will, and then they either lose that contract, they lose that proposal. They have to act on that decision. So when you said that decisions aren't always rational, I think is not rational to the individual that sees it because they don't have the full.
So decision making really, as far as I've learned, it has two different schools: rational decision making, irrational decision making. The military works on a rational decision. You assess the situation, you identify and define the problem, you get your facts and assumptions, you develop potential courses of action, you put in your evaluative and screening criteria, then you make the decision, you implement it, and then you follow up, do an after action review, iterate and improve, right? That's
Yes,
rational decision making,
yes,
right?
the op order. Yes, op order.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
on, yeah, one on op order.
In the
Yes.
civilian world, many folks that are in positions of authority haven't had problem solving decision making class one. Now, in some companies, they do a good job of that, okay? But the constraints, the availability of robust information, the overall business situation may not always allow for that robust, rational decision making. So folks have to, as you said, have to make some decision on time is better than none late or the perfect one late. Sometimes you have to make decisions based on the best input of the people available, whether they're experts or not. It just is what it is. And that's the difference. So, where military members have to get comfortable in a very volatile world, they also have to figure out how to leverage that in the civilian world where the volatility isn't necessarily life changing, but the uncertainty and the gray stuff in the decision processes and all that are very oftentimes very much more impactful.
Wow, that's man, Bill. Thank you for that because I had to realize. I had to realize, and speaking to other veterans too, and I have a lot of conversations with some veterans that's out there that's been in the sector for a while. And that's one of the struggles that they have. It's we've been ingrained with the warning and order. You get the stand by, stand ready. Hurry and wait type thing. Once you get the oppo, you have to go ahead and then the after action report. Okay, let's see what we did right, what did wrong, so next time it won't happen again. Also, what I've seen in the civilian sector is, hey, we have to, like you said, we have to act on it now and then whatever the results is, then we act on the results, right? But right now we have to go in and we have to move because, as you said, time is money, right? And definitely in the civilian sector, is the overall money, the information you're trying to get, because they have food that has to be moving fast. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, conversely, there's other folks that are so afraid of screwing it up that they won't make a decision. And delaying the decision can also be irrational. So, that the other bit that's related to that is the concept of commander's intent. Okay. What's the commander's intent? What does good look like? What's the end state we're trying to achieve here, right? Military is far better at, in my opinion, than most civilian businesses. That goes back to I think, the business level strategic planning, and not just whether they have it or not, but whether or not they could communicate it in a way that flows through the organization in a meaningful way. There are a lot of differences culturally like that.
Wow, that's huge, and that rolls right into our last thing we're gonna touch on before we wrap it up is you highlighted in your book saying that people are our most important asset. They also are expendable. So
Yep.
because I've experienced that, like, oh man, hey, is it point like you said, like the seed didn't even get a chance to get warm to get cold before somebody else is sitting in there and the machine is still going. So
Yep.
how as a transition, in this transition space, how can somebody make that transition like, okay, well, where they feel wanted and needed and knowing that they feel valued, like how can they make sure that they protect their energy um from
Yeah.
slipping down
Yeah.
that
So I
slippery
think
slope?
it, I totally agree with you. I think the key point is to realize we're all expendable. Start with that. I may be the great guy for the job today, but business conditions change, and I may not be the great guy for the future. I may be performing very well in the business that we have today, but it may require something I don't have in the future, and they don't have time to train me up. Can I give you a quick example? I worked for an automotive parts firm, and they did yeah, drive shafts and axles and mechanical things. Okay, they needed mechanical engineers. Well, many folks know that the whole concept of electrifying the world has come up, and when your focus is on electrical things, you need electrical engineers. Well, you don't just go from one to the other overnight. So, and the other bit about being expendable, people are our greatest value, right? They're our greatest asset. We love our people. But when you got to cut money, when the revenue's not where it needs to be and you got to cut expenses, one of the fastest ways to recover money is to get rid of people. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it is what it is. And, I've been around that a lot over the years, unfortunately. And I've survived many and I fell victim to a couple. Okay. However, the alternative is if you don't have a thoughtful, planned way to reduce heads, you might lose the company altogether. Then everybody's out. So it's a difference in mindset.
Right, right, and thank you for sharing that insight, Bill, because and the way how my mind think is, you come into the service and on the listed side on a contract, right? Whether it be 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
6 year. I know they just changed the way how the contracts work now, but when I was coming through, I was a young kid from New York City. I signed up for 4 years, came in as an airman basic E1, and I said, well, I
Mm-hmm.
got a 4 years, 4 years. I got a paycheck steady because I don't mess up,
Yep.
right? I got a
Yep.
paycheck coming in twice a month.
Yep.
It's not the same on the civilian side because and you also mentioned that in your book too, the at will employment or at will. Like I had to kind of do a deep dive into that. Like, wow, what does that mean? And a lot of veterans, especially the ones who just now transition back into the civilian sector, they have to know what that at will means. Like it could mean they could walk in and they could like, hey, today's your last day, or don't even log in to this thing, or at least in the service you have that, you have that transition, you go to tabs, they give you everything, hopefully they need to give this book in transition, by the way. So anybody in the DoD transition space, y'all need to put this book for all the people that transition because this is powerful right here. So, Bill, before we close out, can you touch on that right there?
Lot to unpack there, Kings. Which part do you want me to unpack there, buddy?
Oh, about the transition, about the
The at will
coming in on
part?
a contract, right? Or like you come in
Yeah.
the military, you on a contract, but then once you transition, there's no real
Gotcha.
contract. Is
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
performing.
Very few people in America are on an employment contract. Now, oftentimes you'll get an offer letter. That's offering you the position. That's not offering you the position for a set number of days, weeks, or years, right? Okay. That's just opening the door saying basically, welcome to the party. Here's the terms and conditions, right? So you're not on a contract. And while every state interprets it just a little bit differently, at will basically means you can quit whenever you want with or without cause, and they can fire you whenever they want with or without cause, with some legal exceptions for abuse and those kind of things, right? Um, it's a scary place to be. I think one of the things many of our service members, kind of have this, we're resilient and we're tough kind of attitude because we've been through basic training and maybe we've been through some advanced training and we've deployed and this and that. I'll tell you what, you want to check grit. Have your job at risk every day for a few years. Then you want to know what grit is. Holy smokes. Go be entrepreneurial when you have to actually start something new. And there is no backstop. You're going to succeed or fail by your hand and your hand alone. That's grit, buddy. I used to be tall, thin, and good looking. Yeah.
Right, man, that's good. So, as we wrapping up, Bill, I just want to say, what is one thing that you would like to leave with the transition service members that's coming into this new transition space? Of course, have to pick the book, but what is one thing that you want to share with them on their transition journey?
Yep. Start now. You can't cram for the transition exam. Okay. Start now. That uniform is going to come off. Maybe it's next week, maybe it's next month, maybe it's 10 years from now, but that uniform is going to come off. So start today. And where do you start? Start with you. Figure out who you are, what do you bring into the party, and how do you define success? And if you can do that kind of work early on, it helps you define the target job that you want to get. It helps you be able to articulate your value to an employer a little bit better. It just really sets you up in a much stronger position for success. So start now and start by focusing on you. Who am I? What am I bringing to the party? And how do I define success?
You know, I can help you out here on the scoop. How do they get a copy of this book right here? Because for the ones that's listening right now, if you're in the transition space, if you're about to transition out of service, you're going through. When I was transitioned out of this family readiness center, I don't know what they had. The army have the transition battalion or something like that. Is how y'all transition out
They
to.
have transition, but yeah, and most installations have a transitioned office. Yeah.
Right. So if y'all could write to y'all transition office like, hey, can we read this book in rotation, or can we have, this part of our exit strategy? So, but until then, Bill, how do they get a copy of your book? Like, where do they
Yeah.
should they go on Amazon? Well, on the website?
Yep.
Like, if you could share that information.
Yep. So they're on Amazon. You go into Amazon, type in Bill Kieffer. Both books will pop up. There's another Bill Kieffer out there that writes like science fiction. That's not me. Okay. There's images of the books up there. They're on hard copy and in ebook. Okay. So either way works. You can also get a hold of me if you want, Bill at veterancareerjourney.org, or check out my nonprofit website, veterancareerjourney.org. Not only do we have a whole bunch of insights that I put up regularly, but we offer training classes at no cost to veterans. You can register online every month. We got a course based on the first book. We have a course based on the second book. They're 1 hour long, they're live, virtual. We also offer an intro to business that we just put up. But books are on Amazon. Get a hold of me via email, bill at veterancareerjourney.org, and check out our website. If you want to learn more, register for a class, man. Register for a class, and we'll see where it goes.
I appreciate it, Bill. Well, I will be registered for a class because, like I said, I come across a lot of veterans who just don't know about the information, and my journey on this earth until I'm no longer breathing is to pay it forward. So, thank you, Bill,
Absolutely.
for being a part of the scoop. And remember, the Vet SOS. Don't worry, if you're drowning in the sea, throw the lifeline. Vet SOS. We're here to share our stories. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to everybody. Until next time on the scoop. Thanks. Out. Peace.